Okay, hi everyone, welcome back. We are on to question 18 to 22 of Acer's Green Booklet, section 1. So let's get started. This is quite a long passage. It's not super long, 3 paragraphs. For these longer passages, I would recommend reading them first and sort of summarizing what they're saying. Literally, you don't just write what I've said on the screen. You don't have to use full sentences. Shorten phrases, use arrows if it helps. But for something like this, it's probably best to have a bit of a summary there. So this passage is basically saying that there is a movement against using animals in experiments. Scientists improve the living conditions of the animals, hoping to counter this movement or to address their concerns, but it wasn't enough. Then it goes on to talk about human rights, and it says that human rights are abstract and they are arbitrary. We just made them. We made them up because we wanted to. And then it says at the very end, verbal arguments, so just like arguing verbally, are useless because this is fundamentally a difference in values, not in details. So I'll just pause here and kind of broaden it out a little bit. Have you ever felt like you've been in an argument with somebody, friend, family member, or you've seen arguments, on TV or politics, and you just feel like the argument is going nowhere? And the reason is probably because the argument is there's fundamentally a difference in values or perceptions of what people value most in the world, not details. And that's what this is saying as well. This is saying that the scientists and the anti-vivisectionists are arguing about details, the quality of living of the animals and the size of the cages and how much food they're getting. But that's not making any progress because this is not an argument about detail, like the detail of the animals' living conditions. This is an argument about values, about how animals should be treated in society in general. So that's what that means. And so that's why it says the solution is not an academic confrontation. We're not going to be able to solve this with an academic paper, but it is a public referendum. So the public and what the public values. Okay, so question 18. The passage implies that for anti-vivisectionists, respecting animal rights involved. So these people are the ones that are advocating for animal rights. Answer is B, but we'll eliminate C and D first. So C is attention to details of animals' lives. They would care about that because they would obviously want animals' lives to, they would want the details, animals to live well, and that therefore that involves attention to details, but it's not it's not like the fundamental reason. D says minimizing the dangers in animals' lives. They don't want to minimize the dangers. They want to eliminate the dangers entirely. So that's wrong. Okay, A is protecting animals from suffering, and this is a tricky one. So these people want to go beyond just protecting animals for suffering. They don't want humans to interfere in the lives of animals at all, which is why B is correct, and the specific quote is legal supremacy meaning, power over everything really of humans is an ethical choice. So, okay, maybe think of this as like you're talking to someone who's vegan and you're trying to justify why, eating meat is a good thing. And you're arguing like, well, the chickens that I eat are free range and they're organic and they don't suffer, so that's fine. And then the person who's vegan or vegetarian still doesn't agree with you, and you're like, well, I'm eliminating all of their suffering because they're raised in open paddock and they're not battery hens, so that's okay. But they're saying we shouldn't be involved in their lives at all. Like, that's kind of a fundamental difference, which is why people who are vegan and vegetarian, even though they could see an animal that's like well cared for and doesn't really suffer and at all, they will still be vegan or vegetarian because they're like, we shouldn't be doing that at all. It's like more of a ethical, value-driven choice rather than a detailed choice. So I hope that made sense. If that was a little bit confusing, and I know I just totally generalized the entire vegan and vegetarian population, please don't leave comments down below. I'm using it as an example. So yes, they want to the answer is non-interference in animals' lives. They don't want humans to interfere at all in an animal's life, not just to eliminate suffering, but they just don't want any human interference. So that is why the answer is B. Question 19. The passage suggests that researchers, so these are the researchers in the lab doing the animal experiments, A, make dishonest claims. Nope, no really reference of that. B, have no interest in animal welfare. No, they act to improve the welfare. The passage states on like 2 or 3 times what the researchers have done to improve animal welfare. C, ignore the fundamental position. Yes, this is correct. This is why verbal combats have not led anywhere. This is why this is a debate about values and not details, because the researchers are ignoring the fundamental position, the underlying issue that they both disagree on, which is one of values. So C, and hopefully that was pretty clear. D, underestimate the improvements required in laboratory conditions. So yes, I mean, that could be correct. Maybe the researchers are underestimating what they need to do to improve the lab conditions, but it's not the underlying reason why there is a conflict. The underlying reason is that we're debating 2 separate values and ethical. This is like a value ethical driven debate, not a detailed driven debate. Okay, question 20. According to the passage, the original motivation for the establishment of human rights was, hopefully this was pretty clear. The answer is C, pragmatic. So pragmatic just means like, yeah, rational, reasonable. That sounds about right. That makes sense. And the direct quote is presumably because this would be beneficial for social life. So human rights were established because it would benefit society. Yeah, sounds about right. Basically, that's what they're saying. And the word presumably is kind of interesting in there. That kind of clues you in a little bit more to the fact it's pragmatic, rather than like altruistic or I don't know, serving society. Yeah, I don't know how else to say it. It's very pragmatic. Like, yes, this is right. If you are still confused, we can look at the others. So A was moral and B ideological. They're quite similar. No, an ideological or moral establishment would be like, you'd be referencing philosophy, and human rights are ideologically the right thing to do. Humans, from an ideological perspective, that's just not what it says. It literally is like, yeah, presumably because this will be beneficial for society. And the reason it is pragmatic, not altruistic, is again because of that word. Yeah, I think that was pretty clear, hence why I haven't put the others in. But if it wasn't, again, comment down below. Okay, question 21. According to the passage, the animal rights controversy is based on. Okay, that is a very, very key 2 words in that question. So A is the sentimental rather than the rational, and the rational rather than the sentimental. Now, if you listen to those tutors out there that say if there are 2 options in section 1 and they're opposite, and that means that one of them is the correct answer, you would get this question wrong because they are both wrong. Because basically, this controversy is based on both rational and sentiment. So they're both wrong. C, matters of fact rather than value judgments. So the arguments are based on matters of fact. The researchers are using facts about, the cage conditions and the treatment of the animals to make their argument. But that's not what the controversy is based on. The controversy is not based on fact. It's based on values. Again, remember, the verbal arguments aren't going to work. This won't be resolved in an academic forum. So it can't be based on fact. And then D, value judgments rather than matters of fact. Yes, because fundamentally what this controversy is about is how much value do we place on the life of animals. The anti-vivisectionists will say they should be equal to humans, and if we're not going to do this on humans, we shouldn't do it on animals. And the researchers are saying, well, no, we value animals' lives less, basically. We're going to treat them as well as we can in their conditions, but we're still going to do experiments on them. And I'm not coming here with judgment saying if that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what the passage is saying. So again, this is a debate about values rather than fact. And I'm sure if you can have, spend a few minutes thinking about when else or what else in society is it a debate about a difference of values rather than a difference of fact, because there are a lot out there and they all make for excellent Section 2 topics. Okay, final one. We have Thomas Jefferson, and I suspect probably lots of you probably know this. All men are created equal and independent, and from the equal creation they derive rights inherent and inalienable, among which are the preservation of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, are those famous words. Okay, so the question states Jefferson's view and the view presented in the passage about animal rights. So if you look at the answer options, you'll see A and B kind of lumped together and C and D lumped together. A and B talk about the source. A and C lumped together and B and D lumped together. So A and C talk about the source of human rights, and B and D talk about how human rights operate. So all you have to do is split those up. We've got two questions. What is the source of human rights, and how do they operate? So we'll break it down. Source of human rights. Thomas Jefferson says that human rights are derived from an equal creation. He's basically referring to a higher power. For him, that is God, capital G, the Christian God. If you know a bit about Thomas Jefferson, American history, you'll know that. But if you didn't, that's fine. Equal creation. He's saying that human rights have come down from us from a higher power. The article says humans arbitrarily made human rights. We had an earlier question about how human rights were made for a pragmatic reason, not for an ideological reason or not for a religious reason. So here there is a conflict between what is the source of human rights. So that should instantly point to you that the answer is A, but we'll look at the other one. So the second question was, how do human rights operate in society? Thomas Jefferson says that they operate to create equal, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all. And then the article says that human rights are beneficial for human life and for human society, which is basically the same thing. So they are, they are similar, but they're not so similar that we would go for D. So basically it comes down to A and D. They differ in their assumptions and they're similar in their analysis. But even though these two are similar, they're not so similar that we would go for D. A is the better choice. And again, this is an example of where we have two answers that are both pretty correct, but A is more correct because there are some flaws in D. So hopefully that makes sense. And as always, if you've got something like this where there's a double barrel question where you've got to answer or address two things, split up, look at the answer options and say, what are the two things I'm being asked here? One is human right, the source of human rights. The other one is how they operate in society. Once you can do that, it actually becomes really easy to do. Okay, that is the end of that unit. The next video will cover questions 23 to 25. As always, please leave comments down below if things do not make sense. So if you have any feedback, if I talk too fast or too slow or whatever it is, also check the description because I have more links there for resources and how to get in contact with me if you need extra help or clarification. Okay, thanks everyone.